I think we are live. Hey, Kayla here from My Vegan Dreams. And guys, I'm so excited. I have a very special interview with someone who is just really amazing, really good guy, and has been vegan for 4 years. And this is someone who went from, being a dad, husband, grilling steaks on the barbecue all the time to now being, vegan all the way. And I think that this interview is going to be so beneficial for you. So without further ado, welcome Bill Pescosolido.
Hi, Kayla.
Hi. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. I'm going to just check in before we get started just to make sure on Facebook that everything is going smooth. And if you guys are tuning in, just type a comment down below where you're calling in from or where you're tuning in from, and let us know how long have you been vegan for, or if you're struggling to go vegan. Would love to know your journey. But what I'm really excited to talk to you about today, Bill, is your story, because it's just, I've heard it from Michelle a little bit, but I want to hear it from you and what got you on this path from, grilling hot dogs to being vegan.
So it's interesting. So we, many years ago, and I guess when I say many years ago, we're probably talking around 2013, 2014, that range, we decided to become pescatarian. And the reason is that, first of all, we love sushi and we love going to sushi restaurants, and we love just that whole experience. And we probably went out to sushi restaurants. We got a favorite one that we were at probably at least once, maybe if not twice a week. And so going to sushi restaurants and having sushi was definitely a big part of our lives. So being pescatarian made sense in that regard, and if you don't know pescatarian, or if anyone in the audience doesn't know, pescatarian means that you're only eating fish as far as a meat. So, but the reason why we, I'd say, downgraded, or whatever you want to call it, from just being full-blown meat eater, which I was for, all of my life up to that point. I was just a regular guy eating regular food, I thought, and, doing steak tips and chicken and everything, like most people out there. The reason we went from that to pescatarian is we just started to become a little bit more conscientious about what we were putting into our bodies and what we were eating. And, we'd watched a few documentaries like, Forks Over Knives and What the Health and Food Inc. and things like that. And it really just, turned us off on factory farming, especially, and just the typical, ground beef and chicken and meat and pork and things like that, it just didn't feel right for us anymore. So we were kind of rocking and rolling as pescatarians for a good amount of time, for a couple of years. And I'm being from New England originally. I wanted to bring the family back to New England for a week-long vacation, doing a very traditional summer vacation in New England. Like, we rented a house on the beach in New Hampshire. And as you can imagine, New England on the beach, it's summertime. It's lots of clam chowder and lobster rolls and lots of seafood and good stuff. And I was really excited to introduce, Michelle and the girls to that, because they were Texans, right? They'd never really experienced a traditional New England summertime vacation. So we were there, and it was probably on our second night there that we were out at a restaurant, and the question came up, does a lobster feel pain, if you boil it? Which I think a lot of times, growing up at least, the thought was oh no, they have no nerves, they don't feel pain, and you drop it in and you boil it and everyone's great, oh cool, let's get our party on. And my daughter Megan found a video that said, well, in fact, actually, lobsters do feel pain. They have a very sophisticated nervous system, and you drop them in a pot of boiling water, and it's probably the same as if someone dropped me into a big cauldron of boiling water. It's it hurts a lot. So that just made them, at that moment, meaning them, my daughter Megan and my wife Michelle, they were just okay. And there's some other things, some other videos and some other things that they've seen, but that was sort of a moment where we were actually at dinner at the restaurant, and they were yeah, no more. We're not
Wow.
doing this. We're going to go vegan like right now. And my first thought was, couldn't we wait until we get back to Texas? We're literally on like the second night of our vacation. I still have like reservations, at these restaurants and everything planned, and it had to be right now. But they decided right then and there that they were going to, from that moment, go. Well, I guess from pescatarian would go cold turkey, as I say. Now, for me, again, let's say that was 2014ish or so. Again, I'm not sure on the exact years, but it wasn't as easy for me. As much as I may have wanted to, there's a lot of things, dairy and eggs especially, that were just staples for me. Like I loved eggs. I loved scrambled eggs. I loved omelets. I loved all those things. And so I remained pescatarian for a while. I then went and I started weeding those things out, because again, just more learning and seeing documentaries and just being more conscientious of what I'm putting into my body, being conscientious of what the impact outside of just what I'm eating, what the impact is to the world, right? What that impact is to animals, what that impact is to the environment, and so forth. And through a lot of those different factors and reasons, I then became a vegetarian, which meant you could still eat dairy and eggs. But then eventually, like I said, about 3 years ago, I just said, enough is enough, and went full on vegan. So it was a journey for me. It was not an overnight thing at all. It wasn't a cold turkey thing at all. I didn't wake up one morning and say, I'm going to go vegan. It was, if you really stretch it out, it was probably from about a 4 or 5 year, progression of me getting from where I was, meaning eating anything and everything, full on carnivore, to becoming a 100% vegan.
Wow. And I think that's so cool, because I think that, what we were talking about earlier is just people think that you have to go all in or nothing, and you can do a gradual, and that's what I did too. So I totally resonate with that. For you, what was it like living with your wife who was vegan and daughter who were vegan, and you weren't at that point? Was that a challenge?
Well, so we have another daughter who is not vegan as well. So it was a little bit, 2 that were and 2 that weren't. And I was sort of somewhere in between. And our other daughter, Mackenzie, not really at all. She's just very much just a regular traditional, food consumer. So for us, it wasn't that big a deal. I know how it can be a challenge for most families. If you have, let's say, a family that's the entire family is used to eating just this very, again, a traditional, meals. And if one person goes vegan, does that kind of like upset the apple cart? Or you now feel like you're having to do a whole new, level of shopping and all this different stuff and going to different stores for different things. And does it cost a lot more, or is it, way more inconvenient, and so forth? And, it doesn't have to be that way. And for us, it wasn't. We would still go to the same grocery store to get the same things. And I think just, when you think about if you're a parent with a handful of kids, you probably already know that some of your kids hate this food and some of your kids like this food. And it's probably already a little bit of, juggling balls in the air, trying to find things that everyone in the family likes already. So from that concept wise, it's probably not a foreign concept for most people, having, certain people like this and other people not like that. So we just rolled with the punches. I think when, becoming vegan, it is an important thing, because, it's not like, oh, my doctor said I should lose 10 pounds, let me go vegan, right? I mean, for a lot of people, there's emotion behind it. There's the ethical treatment of animals behind it. There's, the environmental impact behind the decision. There's also perhaps a health impact for yourself that you're motivated by. So when you have these reasons and factors behind you, which is the motivation, those are pretty important motivators. Those are pretty significant things. And if you really believe wholeheartedly in them, the sacrifice of having to do a little extra shopping or to have a couple more things in the pantry or fridge than you normally would have seems very small compared to the impact that you can make. and also relative to the suffering of the animals, right? So does having eggs and cheese and dairy-free cheese, is that a big sacrifice compared to what thousands of animals are facing on a daily basis? In my mind, that's not a sacrifice. That's not a big deal, and it's worth it. And so for us, even the times when you had to shop for and cook for vegans versus non-vegans, it wasn't that big a deal because the motivation behind it and the reasons behind it were important enough to overcome any inconveniences that were presented.
Yeah, so true. For you, what was your biggest driver? The animals, or was it health, or was it the environment, or was it all three combined?
I'd say it was actually a combination. I can't really sit here and say it was just one thing. Certainly, if you were to watch some of these documentaries, and when you start seeing the footage of the factory farms, it is just gut wrenching, right? It's horrific, and it blows my mind, and almost to a point where now I can't even watch that stuff. I mean, I'm glad I'm vegan. I'm glad I don't have to see that stuff to convince myself, because I'm already convinced, right? Because I just want to watch it. It's just so painful to see. So that certainly has an impact, right? But I think for some people, you could maybe see that documentary and be like, oh my God, that's horrible. But then a day later, maybe you just put it out of mind, right? So, and that's easy to do also because it's really horrible to watch. And so you almost want to sweep that stuff under the carpet and not keep it there because it is so horrific. So I, leveraged that as motivation. But then there was also, health factors, which I could say, well, maybe that image of the animals, that's out of my mind, a day later, but the health factors, I know they're always with me. And, I look at it as, you see a lot of, especially, people now that are seniors or maybe 60 years old or above, who maybe they're obese or maybe they're in poor health and they have all these prescriptions, and I think to myself, like, I don't want to have to take 10 prescriptions when I'm in my 70s or 80s. I don't want to have to be visiting the doctor, several times a month when I'm older. And so I look at this as almost preventative maintenance. This is an investment. And even if, maybe the stuff that we buy, maybe it's a little bit more expensive than buying cheap non-vegan food, but that's an investment that I look at that's in my health and my family's health, that when we are older and at an age where you traditionally have to have a lot more care, I'm hopefully not going to have to be spending as much care, spending as much money on prescriptions and doctor's visits and seeing specialists for this condition that they don't know what it is. And it's because of just stuff you put in your body for, 50 years, and it could have been prevented earlier on if you had only had done these things. I can say now, well, look, I'm doing these things proactively so I can have a much, healthier standard of living for myself and for my family for the long term.
Yeah, I totally. And that was something too that when I went vegan or was watching those documentaries, I didn't even know that dairy was so bad for you. I was like, oh, it can cause all these things. And I was seeing that happen in my older, my parents and, just other people in the family. I was like, oh my gosh, like, you just have to stop eating this. This is crazy. So that's really cool. And for you, I know, I feel like being a guy and like doing the whole grill thing and hanging out with other, men, dad, bros, how has that been for you to go from that transition?
So it's interesting. I think it was 3 years ago, I did a long weekend back in Boston, where I'm from, to see a bunch of my, college friends, and, a lot of my friends would like a whole guys weekend thing at one of our friends has a lake house, and they hadn't seen me in a few years because we've been in Texas for many years now. And, they hadn't seen me since I'd gone vegan. So, I remember seeing, one of them, we're like, hey, what's going on? And he looks at me, he goes, what happened? Like, what's wrong? What's going on? Like, I went vegan. And so for them, it was almost like this, I don't know, it's like I joined a cult, or, something weird had happened like that. But which lasted, for 10 or 15 minutes. And then we got into our just, being guys, making fun of each other and having fun and drinking beers thing. So it didn't last very long. But, obviously I was there for 3 days and they're all cooking and grilling, and they had one night they did all these ribs and stuff. And I have my little mini corner of the grill where I could cook my vegan sausages, or they had like the whole rest of the grill where they had all the stuff on it. And I think, that if you make it a big deal, it becomes a big deal. If you don't make it a big deal, it's not a big deal. And if I'd sat there all weekend long and it was real judgy with them and preaching and being like, you guys should be eating this or you shouldn't be eating that, it would have been a big deal and that would have been awkward and weird and so forth. But, I didn't. It's just, in that situation, it was like, look, this is a decision I made for me. And this is kind of how I am about veganism in general. Like, I'm not here to convince a tried and true ardent meat eater. I'm not trying to tell them change now because you're wrong and I'm right. I think, for me, it's like if someone is on the fence or if someone has questions about it, that's a person, someone who's kind of actually raised their hand and said, I'm interested, I'm curious, I want to know more, or I want to know how to get over the hump and get there. For me, that's the person that I like to speak with about it. And so I can just share my experience and answer questions and give them tips and suggestions and ideas. But to try to convince someone who's not open to it at all, it's like a Republican trying to convince a Democrat that they should be a Republican or vice versa. Like you're gonna butt heads. And if they're not there in a space where they're even open to it or considering it, well, I don't want to, try to convince them of something that they're just completely closed off to doing. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that for sure. And you had said before, even when you were like 10 years ago, right? That if someone would have come to you and said, hey, go vegan, you would have I would have
been like, get out of my face, dude. Like if someone had told me 10 years ago, hey, you'll be vegan, in 6 years, I would have been like, whatever, like get out of here. And, it's funny because, oftentimes if you're socializing or you're meeting people and it comes up, I'm vegan. The most common thing I hear is, oh, you're vegan. Okay. Wow. I could never do that. Like I could never go vegan. And in my head, I'm like, yes, you could. You could, right? You could. Because I thought I could never go vegan. But here I am, living proof as a guy who used to love grilling. I loved grilling steak tips. Like steak tips was my thing. Like we'd have competitions like with my friends and I'd win. Like I was the best. I never thought that I would be vegan. But, you change. And I guarantee, for any of the people that are sitting here thinking, oh, I could never go vegan. I just couldn't do it. It's not for me. I could never do it. I promise you there's probably about 2 or 3 things that those people are doing in their life right now, having nothing to do with food or veganism, but there's probably 2 or 3 things that they're doing right now in their life that 10 or 15 years ago, they thought they could never do, right? Whether that's career development or just personal development, or, I remember when I was a kid, I never thought I'd live on my own, but then I turned 21 and I was living on my own. There's just things in life where we just evolve and change. And these happen for all different reasons. But I promise there's 2 or 3 things right now in any given person's life that they're doing that 10 or 15 years ago, they thought they would never be able to do. So if you could do those things today, why couldn't you also become vegan? And the reality is, and I say this and even saying what I just said, I think if this were like the 80s, it would have been a lot more difficult, or the 90s even, just because my hunch is that the options for vegans weren't nearly as much as they are today. Like if I only had bland tofu, like always, ever, even though right now we eat tofu a lot and we got really good at making it and it's really yummy. But I think, in this day and age where there are so many different, creative options, meatless options, plant-based options, it's, we eat different stuff all the time. And what's also neat about it is that we cook a lot more, than we used to. And cooking is fun. I get, it's just fun to do. It's kind of soothing. And, you kind of like escape a little bit when you get to cook. It's just, you forget about the rest of the world. You forget about what's on the news and everything. You just cook and focus. And it's just like a mental escape, and it's fun. And obviously when you're cooking your own food, you're getting no matter what you're cooking, you're getting a much better meal than if you bought something that was processed or made. So, I just think that anyone who says that they couldn't do it, what you're really saying is that you choose not to. And that's okay. If you choose not to, that's fine. You've made that choice, but don't convince yourself that you can't, because you can, right? Just admit it that you're choosing not to. And, that's the way it is. That's fine. I choose to, and you can choose not to, but let's call it what it is. It's not because you're unable.
Yeah. Such a good distinction right there, that I haven't talked about before. So I think that's really good. And there are a lot more restaurants nowadays that have options and have more than just like salad with, iceberg salad and French fries. So they're getting better. They're getting better for sure.
Without a doubt.
One thing I wanted to ask you, I know you guys travel a lot. So how has that evolved for you over the last few years of you being vegan?
So how is traveling evolved, or
like being vegan and traveling, like has it gotten easier for you, or you eat the same thing, go to the same restaurants?
So I would say that one of the biggest challenges that we face as vegans is when you are traveling, just because of the unknown. Are there going to be vegan options there? Are there not? What are they going to have? Does the hotel have anything? Or it depends upon where you are, but that is definitely a challenge. At this point, at home in our lives here where we live, it's not hard at all. We know where to go. We know what restaurants to go to. We know where to go in the grocery store, like what section to immediately walk to. Like, it's very, very easy now at home to eat vegan. Traveling, not so much. So, so you just have to know what to look for, I guess, and know what things you could order or you could get that can be modified. Right. So there are certain like meals or just things that, they could easily modify this and it would be vegan. As long as they remove the cheese, it would be vegan. Or as long as they didn't put this in, it would be vegan. So just kind of knowing that and sort of having a mental checklist that, okay, most places will have this. And as long as I can get them to remove maybe this and this, all of a sudden it's now a vegan version. Right. The other thing is that there's an app, Happy Cow, that we'll use a lot. And so Happy Cow, you can just plug it in. It'll tell you any vegan or vegetarian restaurant that's in your area, which is helpful. When you're traveling abroad internationally, it does become a real challenge because, you might be facing a language barrier for starters. You don't know what their level of knowledge of veganism is. Traveling in America, even if you're not like at a restaurant that's vegan, any chef knows what it means, right? You don't have to explain it, right? So, one of the things we'll often do is we'll tell the waitress, hey, can we get vegan surprise? And we're like, what's that? We're like, well, tell the chef we're vegan, and would he be willing to just make us something, right? It's like not on the menu.
Whoa.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And our experience, nine times out of 10, that they're like, okay, let me ask the chef. And then they come back 5 minutes later and they say, absolutely, the chef said he'd love to. He has a couple ideas, I have a theory behind it, which is that chefs at a restaurant, they're probably making the same thing over and over and over again. They're making 100 of like this, whatever it is, like a night. And so when a waiter or waitress comes back and says, could you do this? Like make a vegan meal with just whatever you have here as ingredients and stuff. I think it becomes kind of a new creative challenge for them. And it probably breaks the monotony of doing the salmon like 500 times a night. So I don't recall ever a time where they came back and were like, no, we can't do that. It's impossible. Like it's almost always, they're like, sure. And it's great. Like the meal is fantastic. And a lot of times the chef will come out and they'll be, hey, like, what did you think? Like, I really love making this for you. So we just ask for the vegan surprise and
the vegan surprise. I love it.
And we won't know what it is. The chef won't know. Like it'll happen. Like the chef will whip it up there on the spot.
I love that.
Yeah, you just got to ask. And again, it's hardly ever has that not worked out in our favor and been a really, really good meal as well.
Oh, that's so cool. I definitely have to try that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips? I know because you did the gradual process of, one of the things we hear all the time is, oh, but cheese. Any tips for people who are vegetarian but just can't give up the cheese?
Well, sure. I mean, there's vegan cheese now, so that's easy. I think that, not specific to any particular food item, but I think my advice would be that your journey has to be your journey, and there shouldn't be a time limit on it or a time frame. There shouldn't be that you have to compare yourself to another person and how they went vegan or not. Going vegan cold turkey, I think is a big challenge. You gotta, if you're doing cold turkey, you gotta like empty out a pantry and a fridge and restock with all new stuff. You gotta educate your stuff on it. So I would think if there's people that are, first of all, just curious about this, the first thing is just try one meal a week. Do your meatless Monday, or just try a couple of meals a week where you're intentionally doing plant-based and weave it in, right? Start maybe removing a couple things from the pantry that are not vegan and replacing them with things that that are. And just kind of weaving that in to your routine. Because ultimately, being a successful vegan, part of it, like anything, is about the routine. Like you're going to the store to get this stuff, you're eating these kinds of things, and it just becomes your lifestyle, which is your routine, of course. So don't compare yourself to someone else's journey. Your journey is your own. If you start off dangling your toes in the shallow end of the pool, fine. I don't think anyone should judge you for that. I don't think vegans should judge vegetarians or vice versa either. Just not a good thing. So don't compare yourself to others. Take it step by step and let the process evolve and enjoy the process. I think one of the cool things for me and why I am now successfully vegan is because it wasn't forced. It wasn't thrown upon me. It wasn't done with time constraints or you've got to do it in a certain amount of time. The whole process evolved the way it naturally did for me, which again, it was different for my wife and different for my daughter, but that's fine, right? If it was any other way, there might be resentment or weirdness now. And if you're in a family where there's only one person that's vegan or a couple that are and some that aren't, if it's the forced weird thing, it'll create resentment. So let the process happen. Let it just evolve naturally and organically and, do what you can, but just do it intentionally, and if that means, like I said, one meal a week that you're purposely doing vegan, great. One whole day a week that you're doing vegan, great. Maybe start supporting, if there's vegan restaurants in your area, go to that restaurant, try to go there once or twice a week, to support that restaurant, but also get you to eating, plant-based. But don't feel it's got to happen overnight or it's got to happen cold turkey.
Wow. So many good tips. This has been amazing, Bill. Thank you so much for being on here and sharing all of this, because it's just stuff you don't hear about a lot in the vegan community. And I think it's very, very beneficial for anyone on this journey. So thank you. And if anyone's watching this, definitely give Bill some love for being on here. Would love to talk with you guys in the comments. I see Lola's on, Patty's on. Lola. We have someone that's vegetarian trying to go vegan. Awesome. Hey, Jeff. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. And if you think anyone could benefit from this, definitely feel free to share it and drop us some comments below. We would love to hear from you. And with that, we will talk to you later. Thanks so much, Bill.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, Kayla.
Bye.